Hey everyone, Life on Side B is a podcast of Holy Ourselves, which helps integrate faith and sexuality through spiritual direction, cohorts, and resources. Learn more at holyourselves, WHOLLY ourselves.org. Before we start, we have another listener message.
Hey, this is Ben from Wisconsin. I'm straight and cis, and I imagine I'm not the only person who has benefited deeply from being a fly on the wall for your conversations, that y'all have had the conversations that you wanted to have in the ways that you wanted to have them. Thank you so much. Personally, as a parent, as a friend, as a pastor who works with teenagers, who works with parents, who works with volunteers of all ages that come alongside teenagers as they are wrestling with their own questions about sexuality, regardless of where they're coming from. Thank you so much. You have enriched my life. I've been around since season 1, and I'm grateful that y'all are going to leave us at a time when we're still hungry for more.
Hello, welcome listeners to the Life on Side B podcast. This is my last episode. I am Grant Hartley. You hear my sultry voice. You have heard my sultry voice before. I'm in kind of a weird place emotionally. But I am here in Lincoln, Nebraska, at a coffee shop, because this was what worked out to be the place to record this episode with none other than Scott Herr. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Grant. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
This is something really sweet, but you and I meet every winter break for Christmas.
Yeah.
For how long now?
Oh, gosh. It's been a long time. It's 2016, 2017?
Something like that.
Yeah.
So
I think so.
Almost a decade.
Yeah, it feels like it, except for the COVID years.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
I guess there were maybe 1 year where we didn't meet, but yeah, because we both have family here and we both come here for Christmas.
Yeah.
And it's always worked out really great.
Yeah, it's really sweet because we live busy lives and it's difficult to stay in touch with anyone long distance. So it's just nice to every winter come together.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to spend time with you.
I know.
And I thought you'd be a really good guest
Thank you.
To sort of wrap up this chapter of my life with me.
Yeah.
And to talk sort of about what the future might hold, to dream, to get some perspective, because you've been involved in the Side B world for a long time.
Yeah.
But before that, I have a story.
Okay. Of course you do.
You'll notice that I have brought a candy cane today.
Yeah.
I was at a coffee shop this morning, and as I was leaving, I walked up to the door, and an older woman. Do you have a random name that we can assign this older woman?
Carol.
She said, "Excuse me." And I said, "Oh, yes." And she handed me a candy cane and said something like, "Merry Christmas, God loves you," that sort of thing. Really sweet. And if it had ended there, this would be a really beautiful moment. And listen, I love Carol, the woman that we have given the name Carol. She loves the Lord. But as the conversation progressed, and I mentioned that I want to care for LGBTQ people, and I'm getting a degree to help with that. That was a topic that she had some thoughts about.
Oh, I'm sure.
And so I wish I would have stopped her and said I had to go.
Yeah.
But I ended up staying while she told me that gay people are being brainwashed so that they won't reproduce. And that being gay isn't who I really am.
Okay. Right.
So a mixed bag, that conversation.
So many. How crazy that happened right before this conversation.
At the coffee shop where we first met.
Right, exactly.
In the same exact spots where we first met. So I truly think that it's something that needed to provide context for this conversation.
Right.
So I invite you to break this candy cane with me in recognition that Side B people have always had painful experiences, and sharing them together makes it sweet.
Yes. Oh, I love that analogy.
There you are.
Especially for today. I will take this afterwards so I don't have it in
That's a great idea.
when we're talking.
Yeah. Oh, that's
we're recording.
Wow.
But the symbolism of breaking it at the beginning of the episode, I think, is great. Yes.
Yeah, that's really wise. And I will not be partaking quite yet either. So that'll be a sweet end. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
A sweet end
Definitely.
to the podcast.
Yeah.
So the reason I brought you, the reason I thought of you as a guest that I wanted to talk to is I think over the past maybe year or so, I've been thinking about what Side B was, the Side B community was, what it became over the past few years. And I think the podcast kind of was a part of that. There was a Religion News Service article about the Side B Renaissance.
Oh, was that recent?
It was a couple years ago.
Oh, yeah, I think I remember that.
And also that phrase is mine.
Oh,
so it's a little
Renaissance would imply like rebirth, but I think just birth, naissance maybe.
Maybe.
Side B, naissance.
Whatever. I got a little pedantic.
I understand what you mean.
The Life on Side B podcast was sort of a part of that, where Side B sort of maybe stopped being just a theological conviction and sort of started to develop real culture.
Yeah.
And then now we have institutions and I don't know, we're in a different place than we used to be. We used to be dealing with a lot of pushback, and now we're dealing with maybe less or maybe different kinds of pushback. And so you've been a part of Side B for a long time, since almost the beginning.
Yeah. I guess I discovered Side B shortly after I left, because I was in a monastery for a long time. Because you may have remembered from my previous episode of my talking about being Catholic in Side B, as I was on a few years ago, I guess. And I guess I first discovered Side B around 2000. So yeah, it was around 2000 when I discovered Side B through the Gay Christian Network at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you've been involved. I consistently refer to you as the glue.
Well, thank you.
That holds Side B together. You've been in charge of retreats, and you keep in contact with so many people. It's truly saintly behavior. You're very good at it. You're a good friend, and you care for people well. And so I guess my first question is what do you see the broad sweep of how Side B? Do you have any themes over the past few years, or maybe the whole span of Side B since late 90s, Bridges Across the Divide?
Right. I wasn't involved with Bridges Across the Divide. I guess I discovered Side B after that had taken place, and I think was on the decline or was about to finish, because Justin Lee had already started the Gay Christian Network, And then because he and some other people who were involved with Bridges Across the Divide, then they transferred all the language and everything, the good and the bad that comes with that language that we have debated for years and years and years, whether the side language is what we should have, because that comes from Bridges Across the Divide. And then he brought it into the Gay Christian Network. And that's where Side B pretty much existed, as far as I know, for a long, long, long time. Several years, and that's where I first encountered it. And at the time when I first encountered GCN, I just like, do I put my name on here? Do I create an account with my name on it? Because I didn't know if I wanted to be associated at the time with, a website that was Gay Christian Network. But I would go on and I would creep around, as they say, and look around and stuff like that and read. And then eventually I created an account and got connected with some people, and they had a Side B, subgroup that where people could connect and talk, and it was the old message board style Web 1.0. And so I would go on there and I would read, and it was really interesting because the group was pretty small, and the idea of that you could be gay and identify as gay and still want to live, a chaste life, or a life that was what we now call like the traditional Christian sexual ethic. But at the time, I think there was still a lot of negative feelings around it, in the sense that there was a lot of angst. It was like, how do we do this? And what is too much? And there was just a lot of anxiety around the whole, trying to be Side B and what that was, and different people had different ways of talking about it or understanding it, and it was just really, a lot of people would get really bogged down with little things like, oh, I was out with my friend, and we touched elbows and I got a jolt or a charge or something, and they were like, how do I handle that? I'm just and so it was just, there was just a lot of anxiety around being, what it meant to be gay and how to be Side B, and a lot of, obviously, because it was through GCN and it was in a subgroup, you had to have permission to get into the subgroup. So there was still a lot of, there wasn't really a public face to it in the way that we have now.
Yeah.
And then probably, so that existed for several years until probably, I don't know what, like my the next big step that I can remember was like when the Facebook group started, the Facebook group that now is like 700 people or whatever it is. And that probably was the biggest catalyst to kind of where we are today. But also I should go back and say that through GCN and through that little community, that's when the Side B retreats started. And that was probably the first use of the internet or those kind of groups to facilitate meeting in person. And then that started becoming an annual event that we had.
It's still going.
Yeah, and it's still going on. And then it jumped to another level when the Facebook group started, because that was, even though it started small and slow, because when you have a private group like that, you'd only tell the people and the more people that join, the more growth there is. And then through the retreats and through the Facebook group, there's been a lot of discussion about what it means to be gay and Side B or queer in Side B, I guess, because it's not just gay. And so we've it evolved into a place where there's a lot more, less anxiety in terms of how do you bring these two things together? How do you live this out in a way that is pleasing to God, but yet also is just living in the truth of the fact that we're queer, we're gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, all of those, plus. And then, of course, the thing that really kind of made it even more, that kind of jumped the growth of Side B, or not, I don't know if growth is the right word, but maybe the the profile of side B, like raise the profile, would be when Revoice was founded. You know, Revoice kind of came out of the Facebook group and out of the retreats. You know, I think Nate Collins and Stephen Moss first met at a side B retreat, and that's where they first connected, and then they got to know each other, and then they created Revoice, and that, of course, has, you know, just, you know, blown up in many, many ways.
Yeah.
And so then, of course, then out of Revoice, you have things like the Side B podcast, you know, Life on Side B, and all. Then now there are many other Side B podcasts.
Yeah.
You know, Your Other Brothers, all of those sorts of groups. Yeah, and also Eden Invitation.
Yes.
And just a number of other groups that really have helped to give Side B people so many more places in which to connect with each other, and just to help them build community. Because the biggest issue that I think, going all the way back to the GCN days, was just finding each other.
Yeah.
Because that's really the thing that was so difficult, is that Side B people, for various reasons, you know, generally stayed very quiet. You know, I don't know if I want to use the word in the closet, because I don't know how many people would say they were in the closet, or if they would have used that language.
Yeah, sure.
But just wanted to keep it private and not really, you know, talk about it very much, or they didn't know how to talk about it. They didn't have the tools to talk about, how am I being gay and Christian and living this life that's also in harmony with the church, you know, the Catholic Church's teachings, or whatever traditional church they were a part of. And how do I do that? Because it was difficult to see a way forward. And GCN was really great, because GCN held space for Side B people.
Yeah.
And still does to some extent. And it was a place where you could find that commonality with other gay people, and still have a place where you could be welcome and still hold on to your convictions. It's a difficult place to be, and still is in many ways. I mean, there's still a lot of anxiety for many people, you know, associated with how to live this out. I mean, I have anxiety sometimes about how to do it, you know, what is too far, what is too little, you know, all that sort of stuff. But I think what's really great about where we are now is that we have these spaces where we can connect and be open about these things and talk about these things. And I think the other thing that's much better now, maybe than was at one time, was the fact that there's a lot. Side B is that over the years that I've seen, there's ongoing debates between different factions of Side B about what does it mean to be Side B, and what is too much. Do we go to Pride? Do we not go to Pride? Do we have celibate partners? Do we not have celibate partners? You know, what is all that stuff? How much do we engage with queer culture? Do we just stand apart? You know, all that sort of stuff. And at least now, even though not everyone's still, I don't think it'll ever get to the point where there's like unanimity. Yeah. I think Lynn Malone said once, there's no Side B Pope. So there's no like one authority person who says, this is how it means to live Side B.
Well, I'd like to make a nomination.
Right.
Just kidding.
And so I think the thing is, now at least we have places where we can talk about these things and come together and work through different things, or at least talk about different things in different ways that we are, you know, experiencing life as Christians and queer people, and still trying to hold fast to what we see and what we truly believe to be the Lord's will for us. Yeah. You know, living out how we shepherd our sexuality and our bodies and our physical presence in the world. And, you know?
Yeah, I think to fill in maybe one or a few of the lacunae, I'm thinking of another like really big moment was Washed and Waiting.
Oh, yes. Duh. How could I forget that? Yeah.
I think Mark Yarhouse was at a Revoice conference a few years ago, and he was presenting research, and he was talking about milestones in Side B development. And he's like, by the way, one of the milestones could be being washed and waiting.
Yes, that is true. Because I remember I was in graduate school, I think, at the University of Nebraska here in Lincoln. And I remember I had a good friend of mine who was also Christian and gay and was like all of us, held to traditional theology, but didn't always, wasn't always living it out perfectly.
Sure.
As many of us do or don't do. And so I remember us talking about Washed and Waiting, and I think about the same time as Washed and Waiting, there was the blog from Matt Jones and the other person is escaping me. His name is escaping me at the moment. But they also had a blog where they were talking about being students at Wheaton at Site B at the time.
Okay.
And it happened at the same time as Washed and Waiting. And the publication of that book was significant, yes, because it was really the first time that there was a published book from a Side B perspective that really engaged or attempted to engage with a number of issues that we have. And people went, and for the good or the bad of that book, it also raised the profile of Side B in a whole group of people, especially among evangelical Christians, I think, if I understand correctly. And
related was, I don't know when spiritual friendship started, but that was one of my entry points. I mean, I tried GCN. Now it's Q Christian Fellowship. And I entered through the chats, or the what are they called?
Message boards.
The message board.
Yeah, right.
Old language.
Yeah, right. I know. It's ancient by the internet. That's like the ancient world.
But I entered through there, and then I got connected to a Facebook group, and I was like, wow, there's not a lot of Side B people here. And then I found spiritual friendship. It's like, oh my gosh, like we have like literature.
Yeah.
There's like a whole archive that I could explore.
Yeah. Yeah. And that blog also, Ron Belgau and, Greg Webb and Jeremy Erickson and a number of other people. Johanna, I think, also wrote for them.
Julie Rogers was on it.
Yeah, she was on it for a while. Yes, also. Yeah, so that also was a significant turning point. That literature really helped to raise the profile of Side B, so to speak.
And then after that, it was like Washed and Waiting. And then after that was Gay and Catholic was a huge deal.
Yes.
And then spiritual friendship was a huge deal.
Yes.
And then Greg Cole's book, Single Gay Christian, is a big deal. Like it kept growing.
Yes. Nate Collins' book and the number of different books that have been written really helped. I think without Washed and Waiting and the publisher taking a chance on that, probably none of those other books would have happened. I think. I don't know. But also another turning point was, I think, around the time the Facebook group started, there was an article in the New York Times about Joshua, not the New York Times or Washington Post, one of the two, I don't remember, but about Eve Tushnet and Joshua Gonnerman.
Okay.
And that also was like the first time in any major media, if I can remember correctly. I think it was about 2006, maybe I don't remember exactly when, but that was I could go back and look, but that was the first time I think in any major news outlet that, two Side B people had been featured prominently. And I think that was, it was also, because it was primarily focused on the Catholic aspect because they're both Catholic or are still both Catholic. And, those moments really helped to kind of elevate the profile of Side B to the world as a whole. Mm-hmm. And of course, along with that elevation of a more public face comes all the public criticism and pushback from at all different levels, from all different sides. Yeah.
I mean, I think the first Revoice, the year of the first Revoice, there was an LGBT organization in the city that called Revoice homophobic and was adamantly opposed to it being in the city. At the same time, at St. Louis, and at the same time, there was like backlash in the PCA and the SBC about Revoice being like too progressive. They've lost the gospel.
Right.
I was like, I think we might be onto something.
Right. Exactly. And I think it's easy for us sometimes as side B Christians to take on it because we do get some pushback. I mean, everyone gets pushback in different ways for whatever position you take. Lord knows as Catholics, we get pushback from certain, evangelicals or not even, some or different, people saying, oh, you're going to go to hell or whatever. And so it's obviously, it's not something that's unique to us. I think because it's coming at us, it feels more acute to us from those people. And also because certain people who we would assume would be in our court or would be natural allies have not been natural allies to us. And so I think that has upset a lot of people and hurt a lot of people and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And
I think sometimes I just think like when I meet someone with whom I agree on everything, but for some reason I'm still not acceptable because I'm gay. I just think like I affirm the creeds. I think gay sex is bad. What more do you want from me? What more can I do?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And there's this, and
that's oversimplifying the side B position, by the way. But like, I'm saying it for effect.
I definitely think that is the case. And at a certain point, also, I guess recently, and maybe in the last year or two, there's been a part of me that just has been kind of like, I'm just tired of like fighting people, and I'm just gonna let them, in terms of just people I know in my own personal life or, in different capacities who have different views about these things. Over the years, talking to them and realizing nothing is going to change. Like they just are adamant, and you can give them everything to read and everything, and it just isn't going to change anything. It's like, why do you continue to hit your head against the wall? There's a brick wall in front of me, and I'm like, it's like that. It'd be like constantly trying to run into that,
Yeah.
It's like trying to get into, the Hogwarts Express, and you don't have a ticket and you're late, and you run into the wall and you keep running into the wall and nothing changes.
Scott Herr controversially brings up Harry Potter.
And so a while, it's kind of like Mel Robbins has a new book out, Let Them. That's her new theory. It's like, if you want to save yourself a lot of troubles, just let them. Like if people are doing something, just, and you don't agree with it or it's frustrating you, just let them. Yeah. And I think sometimes while we have to be willing, it's like St. Peter says, to be willing, be ready to give, a defense of the hope that we have within us, or like explain that to people. We also don't have to go out of our way to, unless we're called, I feel like unless the Lord is leading us, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't talk about it or be open about it or whatever the case may be. That's not what I'm saying. But it's just, I think in some ways, sometimes if it's causing you too much anxiety and frustration, and it's just that sometimes it's just better just to live your life and know who you are in front of the Lord. And it's easier said than done. I mean, I have trouble with it, but but just to realize, I'm okay with it, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah.
I
think in the history of side B, there's always been like trying to maintain, how do I put this? There's been waves of opposition, and trying to maintain a sense of self has been like a fundamental side B struggle. Like, how do we stay on the path we feel chosen, that we feel God has given us? How do we stay faithful to God? How do we live and survive and thrive as a community and deal with just consistently
Yeah.
every year, every other year. Feels like every 6 months on social media there is something.
Right. Yeah.
A few years ago, there was someone who I respect him. Someone who wrote an article about the death of Side B, and I was like, oh, I didn't know we were dead.
Right. Yes, exactly.
So it's just like there's always this
Right.
position that I think is a kind of necessary and creative force inside B.
Yeah.
And once you lose touch with that, you might start to go off track. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like I think that tension is kind of a part of. It's like those. I don't know if are they clams? There's clams at the ocean next to the toxic vents.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And they survive.
Yeah.
Next to the toxic vents. I think Side B survives next to toxic vents.
Right. Yes.
It's just part of the structuring force of Side B history. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's probably I think that's a good way to think of it. In many ways.
But I don't know if I had a point, but I eventually got to a point.
No, I felt like that in the last thing I was talking about too. I was like, I think I know what I'm doing. So and I think that the one thing that also is so much better now, maybe than in the past, is that now we really do have resources available to us and examples to us of people who really have been able to seemingly live in two separate worlds. I often say that, like, as a Side B person, you're living in the world between the worlds, like from Narnia. It's like,
wow, you're gonna get home.
I know, I'm gonna get it right. Yeah, I'm determined to. Yeah. No, but it's just because you're living, in, and in the queer world, or you are queer, or you're same-sex attracted, or whatever words you want to give to it. But you're also living in the Christian world, and in the part of the Christian world for most of us that is traditional, that holds to, and there's a lot that comes with that. Which many people, there's a lot of that's to be appreciated, but at the same time, you also are encountering people who have definite opinions about being queer and what that means, and also how that does or does not interact with being Christian in your life.
Yeah. And
so it's a challenging place to be.
Yeah.
And I don't know if any of us are able to do it perfectly, or if any of us are really, I think some people do it better than others, but many of us don't. And we do struggle a lot with different things. Yeah.
I think a question I have flowing out of that is, like, Side B is historically and experientially for a lot of people now, it is a lot of managing tension.
Yeah.
And we have to, in order to survive, we have to learn how to manage various tensions, faith tensions, sexuality tensions, political, like quasi-political tensions that are sort of intersecting with those. So how do you manage tension without giving into bitterness? How do you live next to the toxic vent without dying? I know you don't have a full answer. You're not like you're not the Pope. You're not the Side B Pope. Yes.
Yeah.
But in your experience, like, I think that that's a struggle that I've like experienced long periods where I've just been so bitter.
Yeah.
Part of my entering the Catholic Church, which you are a part of, that process was I was so hurt by so many people.
Yeah.
And I just stopped believing that churches could be good. Like at certain points, I stopped maybe really believing that. And so part of the attraction in entering the Catholic Church was like, I can sit in the back. I can receive the Eucharist. I can leave.
Yeah.
And that's not where I'm at right now. I love my church. Everything, like, not everything is perfect, but like I have a good experience in my church. But like that was for a stretch of maybe a year and a half. I was so bitter and so angry all the time. And I still experience that. And I'm sure a lot of Side B people experience that. How do you deal with all the bitterness?
Ooh, that's a good question. Like, yeah, I wish I had some magic.
All our
Right. I wish I had some magic formula for it. And I'm sure there are others who probably are better at it than others, than I am even. But what I have found over the years in terms of bitterness is in many ways, for me, it really comes down to some simple things that are just, things that are particularly, in my mind, particularly profound, but things that everybody says, oh, you should do these things and, blah, blah, blah. And one is prayer, obviously. I think making time for prayer and focusing on prayer. When I do that, things are much better for me in terms of that. Having that connection with the Lord. For me, I struggle a lot with scruples and other negative things in terms of how I view God. And so I have to really make a conscious effort to connect with God as the lover and as someone who loves me.
Yeah.
And primarily, above all, and doesn't stop loving me, no matter what happens. And I think sometimes that underlying the tension, at least for me sometimes, is that negative experience of God and not experiencing God, because so often, and I know Eve Tushnet talks about this in Tenderness a lot, is that, we have a lot of experiences as gay people of people telling us that we're unlovable, or, I'm paraphrasing here, but basically, she talks about that in the book about how we've had so many encounters. We have people who have been very positive for us in many ways, but yet they've also not always been, and they failed in many ways to help us and to as gay Christians. And so I think really making that connection with God as lover, as someone who loves me, and never stops, no matter what happens, has been very helpful for me in managing the tension. And then also having great people like you and others in my life that
I didn't tell him to say that. I didn't tell him to say that.
That I can discuss these things with.
Yeah.
And I think those two things together help me.
Yeah.
And ultimately just reminding myself that that where I am is that there's nothing there that that God doesn't say that I'm broken or that I mean, I think I remember back in the early 2000s when I came across David Morrison and then what was his name? John Shepherd, I think. They were two, they wouldn't probably have used the word Side B for themselves, but they were both gay Catholics and they were trying to live according to the church's teachings. And at the time they were both blogging and they wrote about some of these things, and in finding their writings, I had a point, and now it's escaped me. But that also, I learned a lot from them in the sense that it's like I'm at God. Oh, I know what it was. God doesn't say, like when the church says, for example, in the catechism, a lot of times it says we are inerrant, disordered, and that, those sorts of things. And I remember reading in one of their blog posts that the disorder wasn't like a psychological problem. It's not a physical problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's just talking about like the spiritual order of things in a way, and how that works, obviously. And obviously it touches on the natural law and other things like that. But it's not making a comment on our psychology, on whether we're psychologically balanced or emotionally, because so many people, I find over the years that when they say you're disordered, it's like everything about you, like you have to go to a mental institution or something. And it's like, it's not that. It's not that.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of bringing. And also another thing that I learned over the years is that putting it in perspective of the fallen human race and how everyone's passions, we all deal with concupiscence, that kind of that desire for things that aren't of God, the lesser goods that St. Augustine talks about. That the real danger we have in this world is that we get distracted by the lesser goods, because we're all ordered to good. It's just that we get distracted by things that are lesser good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also another thing that I think helps me to get to the tension is...
I thought you weren't going to have anything.
I know. I didn't think I was going to have anything to say. is reminding myself or embracing what is good about being queer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is something I've learned from you a lot. And Woody Giles. Yeah. And so, yeah. And I think holding on to those things can be difficult in the face of people who are coming at you.
Yeah.
And saying, everything about you is bad and you need to change this. And also realizing that, straight people don't have, a corner on the market for virtue and, all that sort of stuff.
Why not?
And so often it was like trade one sin for another, It's like, I'm not interested in, straight, becoming straight. I'm not interested in becoming straight, but if I were, it's like, I'm not interested in doing that just so I can go off and sin with a woman, it's like,
I want to sin the right way.
Right. Exactly. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And so I think, realizing those things, and also I just finding some humor in it too,
Yeah. That's,
and realizing, I think a lot of times because we want to do the right thing. I know I always want to do the right thing. Like I always want to do what's right. I want to do what God wants me to do. I want to be in harmony with him, and I want to be, at peace with him. And I feel so often that everything's on me to do it all, all the time.
Yeah.
And that isn't the case. I have to remind myself about that. And that helps to take away a lot of the tension too.
Yeah.
And to realize, and my priest is really good about this when I, going to confession to him, and he just reminds me, that it isn't so serious, he's very good at helping to keep things light and to realize, okay,
you're not teetering on the edge of hell.
Right. Exactly. Right. Just because you didn't do this one little thing doesn't mean, God is, ready to like sweep you away. Or as he often says, many people, not just me, but many people are like, God's mercy is for the world except me. I'm the only one who's like completely,
Yeah.
And so, so obviously, but those are things I think that really help me to kind of sit with the tension, and also just becoming comfortable with the fact that life is ambiguous. Like there's just a lot of tension in life.
Yeah.
And really, I think in a broader way, I mean, for us, obviously, as queer Christians, we feel a certain tension that other Christians don't. But every Christian, in a certain sense, has this tension between living in the world and not being of the world, or the other way around. In the world, but not of the world.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. And so I think obviously, yes, there's something in particular for us as queer Christians, especially being side B queer Christians, that is a particular kind of tension. But I think for so many Christians, especially not to touch in the political realm, but just in the world in which we live today, at the end of 2024, going into 2025,
yes,
there's a lot of tension. I think a lot of Christians are experiencing in terms of how do I live in this world, with what's happening around us in all sorts of different ways. And so I think it's always been there, but especially for us, because so many people don't want us around, so many people, we should be invisible, or, one person is going to tell you you're queer, so you're just going to hell, you're sinning just by being here. You're not even doing anything, and you're sinning, And so I have people in my life who are like that. So, so that's, I guess that's kind of the short, long answer to that question.
I love that it started off. You were like, I had no idea. And then you had like 15 things. It's like, you didn't drone on and on and on.
Right.
Like you had so much. I think what I was reminded of, there was I remember I posted, I think on social media a few years ago, and you might remember this. It was shortly after I entered the Catholic Church, and I posted something like, the only reason I stay is Jesus. Like, if I don't have a relationship with Jesus, what's the point?
Right.
And I think a lot of people, you told me that some people are like, is he still a Catholic? Did he think he made it that message? Like, no.
Right.
I think I just realized that, like, my Christian community, my Catholic community didn't fix all my problems.
Right.
And part of me thought it would.
Yeah, I could see that.
Part of me thought that if I just found the right Christian community, it would fix everything. But that's not true.
Yeah.
What matters above everything else is a personal relationship with Jesus. Relationship with the church is important. I'm a good Catholic. Don't worry. But you have to have a personal relationship with Jesus. That is actually what Carol Carol told me today.
Yes.
It's important to have a personal relationship with Jesus. And Carol, I agree.
Yeah.
It is so important. And if we do all the other things, and we try and manage all the other tensions, and we don't have a personal relationship with Jesus, what is the point?
Yeah.
What is the point?
Right.
So I agree with everything you said. I think that's really important to me. I think Lectio Divina and contemplative prayer have been so important to me. Yeah. Because I am able to enter into Scripture and actually like make memories with Jesus. Yeah. Those kinds of things help me manage tension.
Yes. No, but that's excellent.
Finding God in all things is a Jesuit. It's a Jesuit motto. I'm in the Jesuit church. But what you were saying about the ambiguity of the world, like God is always moving everywhere. Right. You just be on the lookout for how God is moving. He's there. I promise.
And an author that I've read in the past, which I should probably go back to actually, which is really loved by everyone, Orthodox, Catholics, Protestants, Brother Lawrence, finding, the practice of the presence of God. Yeah. And then also there's a Catholic work called Abandonment to Divine Providence, which is also about, abandoning yourself, abandonment to what God has for you in each particular moment. And I think, I remember when I was in the monastery, we would talk a lot about staying in the moment, in this present moment, and not being. And I think a lot of course, we hear a lot about that with the mindfulness movement and all of that sort of stuff. But it's, there are Christian writers that talk about those sorts of things also. And I think that also helps to take away some of the, not that you're ever going to live without tension, I think, because tension can be good. There is good tension too. Because if we didn't have tension, we wouldn't move anywhere, wouldn't go anywhere. Sometimes the tension, I think also recognizing that, because I don't want to trivialize the tension that people feel and that I feel, because it is real and it is something that we acutely feel. And so it's not to downplay the effects of that in people's lives, because obviously it is painful for many, many, many people. But I think also remembering, because we can, one of the things I've noticed in my own life recently is that so much of what happens to me feels like it's either, it's the three enemies of our Christian journey, the flesh, the devil, and the world, the devil, the flesh, and the world. And so I can see in each of those things in different ways that try to keep me from God. And, just like an inherent laziness in my own self, to not pray, or to, be like, okay, I'm going to go to I need to go to confession. And then I just don't leave myself enough time, and so I'm not prepared to go or whatever. And it's little things like that I just coming to terms with the fact, and also coming to terms with the fact that I'm just a sinner, and I'm just part of the human race. And I know, right? It's hard to believe. And recognizing that it's just something that comes with the world in which we live, that we have these things, and how to navigate that can be difficult, but also remembering that we don't have to do it alone. I think that's the beauty of like Catholicism and Orthodoxy, is that, the whole idea that we are saved together, and then nobody goes to heaven alone, that we need other people. We need a community of people, where, yes, we have a personal relationship with Jesus, but it's in the context of a family. It's the way, like, I have a personal relationship with my mom and dad, but it's a different kind of personal relationship than my brother has with my mom and dad. Okay. But yet, we each have a relationship with them. And so I think but it's just but it's also hard because God is spirit, and we don't, Jesus obviously is flesh and bone, but it's not, we don't experience God in the same way. And I remember hearing, I think Mother Angelica say once, that sometimes God recognizes that sometimes we need someone with skin on him.
Yeah.
To be with us and to sit with us in our journey.
Well, that was so good. I loved so much of what you said, all of what you said. Mm-hmm. I have one more question that I'd love to talk about. Okay. We don't have much time.
Okay.
So I think I'll lay out some of my own thoughts as I ask the question. But we're in an interesting stage in the Side B community, in that we have like a multitude of institutions. We have more of a profile, as you said, than ever before.
Much bigger profile. Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I'm experiencing a kind of lull in the pushback.
Yeah. Now, I mean, in a certain way. I mean, there are particular pockets of people who will never cease from pushing back.
That's true. But as soon as I say this, as soon as this podcast gets out, something's going to happen.
Probably.
But I think my question is, what are the particular challenges that the Side B community faces now that maybe they were facing differently in the past, or they weren't facing in the past? And so, some of my own thoughts about this. I wonder if, like, whenever movements or institutions get stable, there is the potential of complacency.
Always, yeah.
And creeping respectability, like a value for respectability.
Yes.
And I think over the years, celibate partnerships have been sort of outside the bounds of respectability for a long time.
Yeah.
I think that's changed.
Believe me, I know.
Yeah. Yep. We both know, there's listeners, there's so much under the surface.
Yes.
Give me a drink sometime. We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
But so I think that respectability is an issue that that we will be dealing with.
Yeah.
I think that politically, in the U.S., this is a U.S. specific one. So sorry to our global listeners. You might have, there might be some of this that applies to you too, but when it comes to the political situation where civil marriage rights are sort of like, people are scared about losing those, and side B people are already like, do we get these civil protections or not?
Right.
Those are some of the problems I see. I also think there's real division. Like I've often thought of side B as divided between those who think that the ex-gay community represents a stronger threat than, and those who think that changing their sexual ethics to be affirming of same-sex sex represents a stronger threat.
Yeah.
So I think that tension is there, and that's also like something that I think has the capacity to tear us apart a little bit.
Yeah.
Those are some of the things I'm thinking about. But what do you see as maybe some of the challenges we're facing?
Yeah, it's interesting.
Give us the raw, the real, go all in.
So it's interesting because I feel like some of those things are like through lines that have always plagued side B.
That's so,
you know. I mean, in some ways, it's kind of like if you look at, I don't know, like just an analogy with the history of the United States, for example, you can see the through line of like, from the very, very beginning, it's like, how much power do the states have? How much power does the federal government have? And that's been a constant battle within our history. So looking back, it's like, I think respectability has always been something that side B people have really struggled with, because we exist, for the most part, most of us aren't going to progressive churches, you know?
There are a few, shout out to you.
Yes. But there you have a whole different set of challenges.
Respectability challenge.
In a certain way, because, you know, there it's like, anyway, for different reasons, people choose to do that. But, and there are great things about progressive churches in many ways, but yeah, I think so. I think respectability going forward, I think, how do you manage that?
Yeah.
Because I think for many of us, it is a great, you know, you want to be accepted by the people you're around, and you want to be loved by them. And so sometimes, you know, you feel like you have to do certain things in order to be loved by them, or they won't listen to you, or you know, and yet you don't want to leave them. And so it's because of their, you know, your own theological convictions or whatever, and it becomes very difficult. But I do think that respectability has always been something that side B has dealt with. You know, I look back, like when the Facebook group first started, there were huge debates about language. You know, how do we call ourselves? Do we use same-sex attracted? Do we use gay? Do we use queer? And you know, it seems to have gotten to a point, so I feel some hope in some ways for some things, you know, where we've kind of gotten to a point as a community where we can just, you know, accept each other for, you know, how we
the specific
to embrace the language.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what language you use.
Right.
It doesn't matter.
Right. But so, I mean, for some people, it's very important. I remember in the first, you know, the first times of the Facebook group, I mean, there were people who were, you know, I mean, a lot of people who use same-sex attracted language left the Facebook group because they were just, you know, being like under attack. And so, you know, as a community, we kind of came to kind of a place where we were like, okay, look, we have to just be willing to just, you know, allow people to use the language that they want to use.
Shout out to same-sex attracted listeners.
Yeah. And so I think there's always this division, like you said. Yeah, I mean, that division between who, you know, is ex-gay. And I think in some ways, you know, and this is the advantage of having multiple outlets for people where they can connect with others and that sort of thing, because there are going to be groups that align more closely with other issues that people have or other theological positions that people might take. Because as people have always pointed out through the years, Side B is such a difficult place to be in many ways, because it's just one little tiny thing that we all have in common, and everything else outside of that is so different and diverse, and it is very hard to hold a group together. This is probably, where you can see the grace of God there, but it's hard to hold a group like that together naturally.
And there's a million ways to get to Side B convictions.
Yeah.
Like Eve Schnitt talks about how like her convictions stem largely from her trust in the church.
Yeah, and I would say that was mine too. That is mine.
That is not how I got there.
Yeah, yeah,
it's not how I got there.
Yeah.
Other people think it's for them. It's just I read the scriptures, and this is what it seems like the scriptures are saying.
Yeah. I mean, for me, being Side B really comes along more importantly for me in the fact that the Lord wants me in a church in communion with Rome.
Yeah.
And that's what I firmly, or at least that's what I hear from the Lord at the moment. And along with that comes Side B convictions.
Yeah.
At least, theological convictions, in practice, sometimes, it's a struggle, just like, it's a struggle. And so, but it's, that's that. And so I think, yes, I think respectability will always be something Side B people struggle with. I think that tension between us will always, and I think, and I think also one thing that is difficult for Side B is because there is no Side B Pope, as Lynn Malone says. When you have certain voices that we have no body to appoint like official spokespeople, and so different people will come forward and they have, whether they have strong personalities or very charismatic, they're going to, they may say this is the definitive way to do it, but that is not the case.
That's right.
It's
organizations or institutions or just individuals.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that was all included. But
that for sure, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so I think in a certain sense, the strength of Side B comes in the diversity of Side B, but also in the, also then in the realizing or doing what we can to keep the Lord and the sexual ethic at its forefront.
Yeah.
There's a great scene from a TV show that I watched with about gay people that you unexpectedly find in the 1950s a basically a person who would be Side B. And at one point he says, "Oh, this is where I turn off. I'm celibate," because they were looking for a sexual encounter. And so it's really cool. And that's the other thing, is that so many people forget that Side B existed before Wash and Waiting.
Yes.
The language wasn't really there. But if you look down through the years, and this is what I think about, like when we get to heaven, we can meet all of the people who would be Side B Christians, gay Christians who lived from the beginning of time.
Yeah.
And we forget that we're standing on their shoulders.
Yeah.
And as a Catholic, I believe that they are there praying for us, and they know us, and we can ask for their intercession and ask for their prayers. And so I think it's something really important to remember that our history is much longer than just 1990 or whenever, or 1998.
I'm so glad you said that.
Or no, actually it was 2000, whenever 2004 or whenever 2002, whenever Wes's book came out.
I think that's so good. And the history of Side B is such a small part of the history of people like us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like people like us have existed from the beginning.
Yeah.
So I'm really thankful that we're in this sort of chapter of the history of Side B.
Yeah. And I think also just one other thing, because I know we have to wrap up, is in terms of like the embracing the diversity, that also in terms of embracing things like celibate partnerships and recognizing that there are many, many legitimate ways to build community.
Yes.
Because the one thing I get so tired of hearing is that if I become side B, I'm going to be alone. I'm never going to find a person who prioritizes me and all that sort of stuff. And that just isn't true.
It's not true.
And so anyway, but I think, yeah. And it isn't for everybody, just like marriage isn't for everybody. You know? The one thing we've gotten away from, and I think as side B people we could re-embrace, is the discerning vocations.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So anyway, I don't know if that...
No, that was good.
Add that in.
Yeah. No, I'm so thankful. So thankful for everything you shared. I'm thankful that we got some time to talk. I
know
that you gave some perspective. I think this was exactly what I wanted it to be.
Yay. Good.
I just want to throw this out there. If there is anyone who is interested in, working on a side B history that could be read, or written.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, I think it would be so fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love. I mean, you would have to be one of the primary sources.
Well, thank you.
And so, but yes, I would love to see that.
That would be great. Yeah.
In the world, I think that'd be so edifying. But yes, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for asking me, and it's such a privilege to be on your last episode.
I know.
You are such an inspiration to me, to so many other people, and I just want to thank you for all the work that you put into being on the podcast and what you do outside of the podcast in terms of all the, everything you do with all of your social media posts and blogging and all of that sort of stuff.
Appreciate it.
It's really a blessing.
Well, I'm really blessed to have you in my life.
Thank you.
I'm going to cry after this podcast stops recording. So I love you so much.
I love you too.
Thank you, listeners. Signing off.